Welcome to the Red Alert Podcast on the JC Sports YouTube page. Obviously, we're gonna have a podcast Wednesday with me and Cindy, but I just wanted to get a quick video out to you to talk about the Red Wings' first day of free agency, which I sense a lot of people are underwhelmed or frustrated with the way that the things have gone. I got an article from the Athletic that I really want to read to you because I think that a lot of people will identify with this article. I'll give you a little bit of a bright side in terms of what I think could happen going down the pike. And look, I sit here today, and there's a lot of players that I did want the Detroit Red Wings to go after, like Steven Stamkos, Marshall, Stevenson, and a bunch more. Like Victor Arvidsson, I thought could have got had, and with his contract that he got from Edmonton, I thought it was a reasonable deal that he got in Edmonton. So I thought that the Red Wings kind of missed the boat there. But what I can say about this is usually on July 1st, a lot of general managers make mistakes. I think the biggest mistake that you can make is overpaying for a player who is older or given too much term. You know, we've seen recently with the Detroit Red Wings, like Ben Sherratt got that term. He got like a 5-year term. Andrew Kopp, he got that his term to keep down the AAV. Usually, when these teams give you another term, they give you longer term. So instead of 4 years, they give you 5 years. It's to shorten up the AAV. That's usually the way it rolls in the NHL. But we look at some of the players that were signed today that were rumored to go to Detroit. And it just starts with Steven Stamkos, 4 years, $8 million. And look, if he was assigned in Detroit, let's just put it here. If Steven Stamkos was assigned in Detroit at the same years that he got, you're you're rightfully probably going to pay 8.5 to $9 million for him. And if you wanted to sign Jonathan Marchessault, it'd be the same term, and you'd probably have to pay 6 million, 6.5 million. Because what happens is there's three teams on that list that are a no tax state. Tennessee is a no tax state, and Washington is a no tax state. So Chandler Stevenson going to Seattle, he's going to get all that $6.25 million that he got in 6 years. And I like Chandler Stevenson as a player. I like Elias Lindholm as a player. I like Nikita Zadorov as a player, and I like Steven Stamkos as a player. But let me tell you right now, 4 years for Steven Stamkos is going to be a joke. 7 years for Elias Lindholm is going to be a disaster, and so is Chandler Stevenson for 6 years. You can make the mistake once, like if you're the Nashville Predators, right? You can make that mistake because you're in your window. Like a lot of people compare the Red Wings rebuild to the Predators rebuild, and the Predators weren't even actually like rebuilding. The Predators were kind of retooling because if you look at their team, they got Roman Josi, who's a Norris Trophy candidate every year. They got a Vezina Trophy candidate every year in UC Saros. They got guys like Philip Forsberg. They got guys like Ryan O'Reilly. They needed some more scoring. That's what they needed. They had Brady Shea too, which is a considerable signing. They signed Alex Carrier they re-signed him as well. So they're all in. Like I think Barry Trotz watched last year, seen that they took Vancouver to the brink and said, "Look, we're a team that could do something." Like they're in their window. Like Roman Josi only has so many years. UC Saro only has so many good years left. So they need to go for it now. The Predators need to go for it now. They can't wait for 3 years down the line when Miles Wood is ready. They can't wait for when some of their prospects are ready in Milwaukee. They got to go for it now. In Detroit, it's a totally different circumstance. You know, I would compare Detroit with Seattle a little bit in terms of they still have some ways to go. And for them to pay $6.25 million to Chandler Stevenson it's going to end up in a disaster for them. Like it will. Because when you go to sign guys like Matty Beniers or Jared McCann or, they signed Brandon Montour today too. So they paid a lot of money for two players. But when you go down the pike and you try to re-sign some of your players, like McCann is going to be due probably in a couple years, Beniers, and we're not even thinking about the kid that they drafted from Yeah, what's his name? Forget Shane. I'm forgetting his name. Damn. But the Seattle Kraken are in the same position that the Detroit Red Wings are in, and I think that if we look back at this in 2 years or 3 years, who's going to be the team that goes farther? Is it going to be the Red Wings or is it going to be the Kraken? I would argue it'll be the Red Wings because they're in a much better salary cap space compared to the Seattle Kraken. And I feel like the Seattle Kraken are just like the Detroit Red Wings. They struggled to score offense last year. They really don't have a reliable goaltender. They don't have any goaltenders in the pipeline either. So it'd be interesting to see what Ronnie Francis does in Seattle because I think that he overpaid for Chandler Stevenson the most, but it is what it is. I got an article from The Athletic. This is from The Athletic, and they list their winners and losers. Um, it goes, the offseason is far from over for the Red Wings, but it's gotten off to an underwhelming start. The Jake Wallman contract dump was an early misstep, but that one could be forgotten with the right corresponding moves that explain why management needed to open up cap space. These moves haven't happened quite yet. Detroit missed out on free agents like Roy, who could have cleavated the blue line after subtracting Wallman. Walmer. Eric Gustafsson is in place of Shane Gosper is a pretty lateral move. Extending Patrick Kane should give them a boost, especially after he has a full healthy offseason to train. But management has yet to identify a David Perron replacement. Back in goal, the Cam Talbot signing crowds decrease unless the plan is to move out one of their existing contracts, which I expect that will happen. I do expect they're going to make a trade. The Detroit Red Wings showed so much promise last season, but management has yet to punch up this roster to build on it. There's still lots of time to make it happen, but maybe it's time to start questioning the Yzer plan. Everyone is totally capable of questioning what they want to question. I think that's more than doable. Like we're gonna look at the Red Wings free agents today that they signed. They obviously signed Jack Campbell. She mentioned that in the article. Eric Gustafsson. They re-signed Christian Fisher. Uh, they made a depth. They made a couple of depth signing with Simone Dries and William Legason, or I don't know. Cam Talbot, 2 years, $2.5 million. You got to expect that there's going to be another move made in terms of how crowded the crease is. Right now, you got Alex Lyon, Billy Huso, um, Cam Talbot, and then Jack Campbell. So those are four goalies right now that could potentially be up at some time. But overall, like I don't the Matt Roy one, the kid that came from LA and he went to the Washington Capitals, that was also a massive overpay. I'm not really willing to go 7 years for the kid. He's a good player, but he's not worth 7 years, and he was signed to a ridiculous contract. And I kind of went through that in the Red Alert podcast page. But when you look at the way that money was thrown around today in the NHL, like look at this. This was at some point today. 2024, 64 signings, 745.8 million. In conjunction, if you like look at this chart, like in 2021, 148 players were signed for $668 million. Like that is just absolute banana lands, and that was what was happening today. A lot of teams are throwing around money, especially with the salary cap kind of getting bigger and there's a little bit of room for these teams. They started thinking like, oh, let's just start throwing around money. And look, I'm all for smart financial decisions. Like I said earlier, like you have an obligation to pay Raymond and pay Cider. So you will be doing that event pretty soon, this off season. But I'm not gonna sit here and be all pissed off about what the Red Wings didn't do. Like I know why people are frustrated. Like they expected a move. I expected moves, but when I look at some of the players like Stamkos, like I don't think we're matching that deal. Like we're not. Like we're just not. Like if you look at the reality, like he's going to a tax-free state. He's earning $8 million a year. You'd have to probably go up to 9 to even that money up. And there's no saying that he even goes. And you know, Elias Lindholm and Zadorov, like Lindholm at 7 years and 7.5 is wild to me. Nikita Zadorov at 6 years and 5 million. Like he's not a guy that's going to be good in the back end of that deal. I mean, the only deal on this chart right here that I really do get pissed off about is Victor Arvidsson. I think that they could have signed Victor Arvidsson. That's my one gripe today. I thought, obviously Arvidsson probably wanted to go to a team like with McDavid, Draisaitl, and that team because they were in the Stanley Cup Finals. But all in all, like that could have been a contract that the Red Wings could have gave Victor Arvidsson, and they might have tried to, but he might have just picked Edmonton by itself. So it's going to be up to Stevie Y to see what he does this offseason. Like obviously, there's a lot of free agents that are gone right now. I imagine he'll be scouring the trade market. I imagine that they're going to have a lot of young people coming up. I do feel like Stevie Y didn't want to repeat the same mistakes that he made last year. Because if you remember last year, he stacked that F and blue line with guys like Justin Hall, guys like Jeff Petrie, and I think that he didn't really want to repeat the same mistake. Like last year, if you would have told me last year in the middle of the year they brought up Simon Edmondson, I would have said they would have made the playoffs easily. But since they took so long to bring Evanson up, I believe that was kind of the reason that they missed the playoffs. I feel like if Evanson would have been up in February before the after the All-Star break, I feel like he could have got his legs. You go into March, he's kind of hitting his stride, and then you could have been in a better situation. I think Evanson was doing great to end of the year. I think he's going to be a good ass player for this team. But I feel like Eiserman looked at last year and what he did to that defensive core, where he stacked the deck to where constructionally he couldn't make a move to bring Edmondson up. It was so stacked with veterans that there was no move to be made that were he's either gonna have to put someone on the waivers or do something like that. And he had to wait till someone was actually injured to make that move. And finally they brought Edmondson up and Evanson did a damn good job, but you can make the case that Albert Johansson deserved a chance to come up here. And because the back end was so crowded, they couldn't make that move. So in the back end, I'm not really worried about it. Gustafsson is a better defensive player than Shane Gottsberg is. They're equal kind of offensively, but all in all, it's kind of a trade in terms of you're not getting the same offense, but you're getting comparable, but you're getting a better defensive player on the defensive end. Forward wise, they still need a top six guy. Then bringing back Christian Fischer obviously solidifies a bottom six type guy. But they still need a right-handed shot in the defense. And they got way too many goalies. So what is going to happen moving forward? That's to remain determined. Last year at this time, I think if you would have said, why didn't the Red Wings make any moves? Like, why did they made a lot of moves last year, and some were a little bit questionable, like the Justin Hall signing. And that's where you can get yourself into trouble on day one of free agency, where you kind of overpay for a free agent that's not really worth the free agency money. And they got rid of Jake Wallman's contract, which I don't really understand yet. But I look at this team and I go, there's got to be something coming down the pike. Obviously, last year when we were talking about this, probably around July 2nd, July 3rd, July 5th, we were talking about, yeah, they added people, but where's Alex DeBrincat? Alex DeBrincat came July 12th. So these things can mature, obviously, as we go forward through the summer. Things can happen quickly. You never know what could happen. But at this point, yeah, there's a lot of people that are disappointed in Eiserman and this day one of free agency. Do I blame you? I don't blame you. I think it's a little underwhelming, especially when you think about the names that were mentioned to go to Detroit. I don't blame you one bit. All I could say is this: like, I think that they could have done better at identifying players that would match this team. But the money being thrown around was just ridiculous today. And there's a lot of players that I liked when I seen their term come across Elliot Friedman's page, or Bob McKenzie, or Pierre LeBrun, or Chris Johnson. Like I heard that and I go, whew. I mean, if there's one player that I could say that like there's a couple players that I can give you a little bit of a I think they're going to be available for trade. Obviously, Martin Nietzsche's out of Carolina. Trevor Zegras is available in Anaheim. I think that's a working relationship with Yzerman and Pat Verbeek. Um, the guy that's just demanded a trade today was Nicholas Robertson from the Toronto Maple Leafs. He has a lot of upside. I think he could be a top six forward, but Steve Yzerman's got to be active in the trade market. That's just where it's got to go. And we don't know what could happen with Truba. Like last year, it could be like a deal like with what happened last year with DeBrincat, where 12 days from now, we're getting a notification on our phones that Jacob Truba is going to the Detroit Red Wings. And then it kind of gives us a little sense of relief, but we need more moves. And I think that they're going to make more moves as we go forward through the summer. So it'll be interesting. I know there's a lot of people that are, skeptical of the Yzerman rebuild so far, and you got every right to have your opinion, and there's no wrong or right opinions at this point in time. Like you're able to have your opinion, and you can put your opinion in the comments of what you think of the Yzerman rebuild so far. But I just think that last year Yzerman learned a valuable lesson. I think last year was a big, big mistake that he made, loading that back end up to where he couldn't get Evanson up, and then Evanson was a way better defensive player than a lot of those guys that were veteran players. So could we see a youth movement in Detroit? Potentially. And that goes to my grading grade. So I'm giving it a B minus. The reason I'm giving it a B minus and not a C or a D or a C minus, they did not overspend too much. They did not overspend. They didn't give too much term to the players that they signed. Um, None of the contracts hamper their future salary cap implications. If we don't see trades, we're probably going to see a step back, which is disappointing. But you always leave a portion of it. Does Lucas Raymond hit the next stride? Does a guy like Marco Casper or Carter Mazer come in the league and just light it on fire? Does Simon Evanson get better? Does Albert Johansson get better? Those are things that can happen. And then let's wait and see what happens the rest of the offseason. Like obviously there's a lot of things that could happen going forward, and the Detroit Red Wings are going to be in a lot of rumors, I believe, in terms of trade. But the Red Wings didn't have a really good day in terms of what people thought they should have done. I thought it was a little underwhelming. It was, but look, I think Steve Eisman's building this the right way. I truly do, and I think that a lot of people they think, oh, you're in year 7 of the rebuild. Well, guys, I hate to tell you this, but when you're in year 7 of the rebuild and you have yet to have a top 3 draft pick, I mean, that's just what happens. Like they didn't get the luck of getting an Austin Matthews or a Macklin Celebrini or a Connor Bedard. They didn't get that luck. So they have Raymond, they have Sider, they have Evanson. Those were 3 great picks in my opinion. But the rest of the players they're going to be developing, and that's a sucky part about it because obviously you would love to sign these free agents just to get you by until these players develop, but in a salary cap league where the salary cap is so unforgiving and there's not much wiggle room to get rid of players in terms of buyouts and such, like you're only limited to a couple buyouts a year, and we've seen with the getting players off your roster, it took giving a pick away. Like it sucks. Like the salary cap is just I got thoughts on the salary cap, but no one wants to hear that in this video. But um I think the Red Wings will be fine moving forward. Obviously it's underwhelming to start the free agency, but I don't know. I just think that they're gonna make a move this offseason. And I'm not really worried about the whole Iser plan or the whole rebuild because I think there's enough good players, and I think that if people are just patient, and I know there's a lot of people that don't want to be patient, and that's fine. I can't tell you differently, but I've been doing research on the average NHL rebuild, and I can tell you right now, the average NHL rebuild is around 7 to 10 years. So it's interesting because we go back to that comment that Ken Holland made a long time ago, where he said rebuilds take 10 years. A lot of them do. I mean, I was going back. I think I went back to the salary cap era, and there was a couple rebuilds that took 10 years before they became, playoff contenders and Stanley Cup champions and things like that. So hopefully we don't go that long. I'm positive they won't. I think there's enough good talent on this roster right now to be a playoff on the fringe of the playoffs. Now let's see what Eiserman does with the rest of the offseason. Obviously, there's going to be some trades available that he can make, and we'll see what happens. But at this point in time, everybody is able to have their opinion on what's going on with the Detroit Red Wings. I'm here for it, but I'm not going to sit here and make broad assumptions on day one of free agency. I'm just not going to do it. But I want to know what you want. I want to know what you think. Let me know in the comments of what you think this free agency has been so far. I imagine it's not good amongst the people, but what do you look forward to, and what's something that you could see Eisman doing down this off season? Like I could see a Nicholas Robertson trade. Um, I could see him making a big deal. But at this point in time, the Red Wings are kind of like in this limbo area, and it sucks. But with the money being thrown around today, I don't think that was in their best interest either. And ultimately, Steve Eisman's job is to look at for the future of the organization. And I thought he did a pretty damn good job today. But we'll see what happens in this offseason. We'll obviously have you cover on the Red Alert podcast. We'll have one Wednesday. If there's no moves, we'll be talking about the same thing. And I know Cindy has some thoughts, but we'll be talking about that in the Red Alert podcast. So thank you for watching this video. If you're new to the channel, please subscribe. This is a little bit of a longer video than usual. I usually try to keep it within 10 to 15 minutes, but I thought this was a different kind of video, obviously, with the way that things happen today. But thank you for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next video as we talk more Red Wings hockey on the Red Alert podcast and on JC Sports YouTube page.